Well, welcome everybody. Let us know, please, for those of you that are listening, if the rain is getting louder and you need it to speak louder, we're happy to do so. But we welcome the rain. So, thank you to the Rangers that are here. It's been a pleasure to be able to engage in conversation with you all. So, thank you for giving us this platform as well for us to be here at home. So, Ale, I think we should introduce ourselves to folks. So, my name is Zee Lopez. But Ale and I have decided that we will introduce each other to be able to kind of create this environment of community that we've been in. Make sure that you all know what we think of each other and why we're doing this together. So, in a quick, Ale for me is this a creative that is living in their truth and sharing their story in an inviting way that engages people to have a conversation about the truth of the matter of where they are, and that they are able to give you pictures, points, almost a point of reference and a compass point to be able to then divulge and share and engross themselves in the story of how that connects through line to everybody else in the community with, even when they think that they're not connected. And that you have done that for your practice as a director, as a writer, as a poet, and then as an organizer, working with specifically youth in the arts world as an administrator of arts. So those are just some of the things that I want to briefly bring up. There's a lot more that he does. But I want you guys to know at least the impact point that drives the passion of what has brought us to this point.
My turn?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you, Zee. I much prefer something like that than you reading a bunch of resident grants or the schools I've been to. I think that's so much more meaningful. For me, Zee is space. He's a cultural worker who works in lots of different intersecting fields. They're a curator, they've worked in development, a program director. I met them in their tenure at Green Space Miami. But why I say they're space makers is because they literally make space for the people in their community, the people they're in relationship with, in particular artists, but anyone who is interested in social movement of any form. Zee's gonna bring her block with her wherever she's at. She's going to make room for people often who haven't been invited into these institutions and these organizations. She's going to set a place for them at the table and make sure that they are invited and respected and have a place to share and that they know that their voice is valid. So that's what I mean when I say that they're a space maker. They also shape the spaces that they're in. It's a way in which curation goes way beyond just like picking the pieces that hang on the walls. It's actually like the whole ethic of how people relate and share with one another from the moment you get an invitation to the moment you say goodbye at the end of an event. Zee's hand is in shaping that whole experience, whether it's in an exhibit or a community center or a school or an office. And the other thing I wanted to say about you, because this is deeply like true about my friendships with you, but I think it's true of anybody who you've decided to devote like your attention to, is that like, and I hope this is true, some folks who are with us are just meeting Zee and there's good reason to believe they'll stay in conversation. But if you get the blessing of Zee's attention on your idea, your project, your art, it's like you've put it in this incredible greenhouse. Like her attention is a fertilizer for ideas and for people. It will grow because she's focused on it and asking you questions, and she's giving this incredible head and heart energy and focusing on what it is you're working on, and inevitably it will sharpen and deepen under the light of your attention. And I think it's an incredible superpower that you have, which is why I'm so grateful that you said yes to be part of this conversation, because I could not think of anyone I'd want to be talking to more.
That's the top. Thank you for coming. No, thank you for that. That means a lot. As you guys can tell, like this is a real friendship. I am honored and privileged to be here with AIRIE, to be here with again the Park Rangers. I am just made in days like South Florida has always been home to this girl backyard. 20 minutes from the Everglades, it's always been my zip code. So just grateful to be here. And so I actually wanted to ask you first of all, talk to me about that root line of your practice, right? Because you come in as a writer, you come in as a director, you come in as someone that works stage and that forms stories and shares them in a very refined environment. But you have come up here with AIRIE to sit in a cabin, to be in wet and dry lands. And so what is that through line? Why did you choose to do this here, to be a part of it?
Well, yeah, I guess the first thing I would say is that my material, as a theater maker, my materials are, I write with bodies and voices in space and time. So by that, I mean, like, the work of the theater happens across time and in space, and your materials are the performers, whether you're performing your own material or you're directing other actors. So what my interest has been, which might be distinct, I'm sure there's overlap, but what my interest has been being here, and what I wrote about in my application was I wanted to learn about how humans, with the experiences and the perspectives and the backgrounds that they bring to the park, encounter this land, and the stories they bring with them to the land, and then the stories that the land inspires once they meet it. And also I would just add also the stories of people who aren't yet in relationship to this land. Because I grew up 35 minutes north of here, and I wrote about it in one of my posts, like my grandparents are listening to my stories and being like, I had no idea. They came from Cuba in the 60s. They had no idea this was down here. My brothers still think I live like that I'm fighting off Crocs to get to my car every morning. You know what I mean? Like, which is only semi-true. No, it's not true. I haven't had any encounters like that. But the other thing that interests me is, what are the stories people tell that bring them to the land? But also, what are the stories that people are telling that keep them from coming here? And then, of course, since I've been here, what stories are in these trees and lurking in the waters? And what stories do people leave with when they've spent time here with? And all of those things collide. And so, as opposed to being an artist, and I feel like there has been probably many who spend most of their time alone out in the fields, either getting photographs or doing sketches. I spent a lot of my time, as much as they've let me, with these folks. And with Ranger Daniel, who's not with us. Daniel, if you're out there listening, so grateful. First couple of weeks while he was here, took me on long drives, took me on a kayak, a canoe trip, and 9 Mile Pond. And I just asked a bunch of questions up until the point of annoying, probably sometimes crossed the line, because I wanted to know what brings people here, what keeps them here, and then what are the stories they're taking home with them? Because that's what's ultimately going to end up on stage. That's my materials, you know.
Okay, thank you for that. And this is definitely not a structured conversation. If you guys as Rangers have any questions, if you've spent more time here with the creatives and in this environment, please feel free to just shoot them off. You can raise your hand, you can just speak them when you see silence, welcome into the conversation, honestly. So thank you for sharing that. And it's really interesting because you mentioned that when you were speaking of the space making was something that you brought up, but it's something that I'm seeing almost in a through line when you talk about the fact that in your creative work and in theater, right, you are developing environment, right? And so when we talk about theater previously, we've talked about it as almost these borders that we have to function within. And so I'd really like to talk to you about the border of those histories. So you even talked about your family coming in and them always living in proximity to this environment, but it not being something that they could really engross in or understanding it, or that they're just, growing in their knowledge and understanding of the diversity. So I'd really love to hear from you on that.
Well, I'm taking on my shoes because I want to get comfortable. Yeah, and I actually want to just echo y'all. Like, I know we're doing this dynamic where there's people not here, but like, this can turn into a conversation at any point, But I just jump in on that because that's been true of the theaters that I've worked in. Like, I grew up in Miami, in Westchester. Nobody in my family is an artist, and I caught the theater bug. I became like a theater nerd. And then I went off to drama school in New York, and I was doing plays in these big, kind of fancy buildings, these prosceniums, and like, my family does not like are not subscribers. They're not used to like calling the box office to find out what's in the show season. Those are environments. I mean, they have more as I've gotten um into that form, but this is not the first time that I get to a border and I cross it and I realize that I've left some of the people that I care about most behind me. And so I think and I wonder if anyone else has had this experience, but I often wonder what happened to the people who didn't step over that line with me. What kept them from thinking this was a place that they would enjoy, would feel comfortable with, would feel like they belong, you know? So that's been my path in the theater. And it's one of the reasons why my plays often don't live in they aren't written for like traditional theater venues, because I am deeply interested in like blowing the doors open as much as possible. And so I'm not sure if I hope I'm reflecting on your question, but the national park is a kind of space like that as well, where I've been able to cross the threshold, and I'm so deeply grateful that I have. And I have asked myself while I'm here, how do we make it more porous? You know, and I have some ideas, but I'm deeply, I probably have more questions now than I even did when I started, you know. But I guess, let me ask you, Zee, did you grow up coming into the national park?
Not with my family. Like, even though my family has been here, it was something that we were separated from too. And my family's background is from the Dominican Republic. So they felt like it's the funniest thing to talk about a national park, because the national park has defined, right, borders and where you go and where it starts and stops. And they were like, it's just so wild. That's not somewhere that we should be. Like, we probably don't even know how to navigate it. So I would come on school field trips. Elementary brought me, middle school brought me. I think I was telling you the story that we were here as middle schoolers and we had no business. Like, that poor ranger, whoever that ranger was that was in charge of us, was like, you know, walk the boardwalk, guys, be safe. And then we're like in our school polos and like these khaki pants. It's not the right clothes to wear. And like one of us would see a gator and like try to shoot off of the water. And I don't know if it's from being from Miami, like being from Florida, right?
The dynamic that like growing up in Miami, I completely agree. The dynamic between like the suburbs and the urban areas and the Everglades is very much like separated. Which, and we were talking about this before, Zee, it's kind of funny because it used to be the dynamic of everything was the Everglades. Mm-hmm. Every single part of South Florida was the Everglades. And if you were a pioneer living on the Atlantic coastal ridge, living in the wetlands, living anywhere in South Florida, you were in the Everglades, essentially. So I think in many ways, and I think this is important because of how South is developed, we have like other ourselves from ecological heritage we have here. So I find like people, like all of us who are ingrained in it and who really are in the ecosystem, they're building the new stepping stones of ecological heritage for the future, because this is not necessarily something that is being built on a daily basis. When pioneers lived in the landscape, when they lived in the Everglades, I feel like it was a whole different story. When the Tequestas and Calusas inhabited these areas, even contributed to ecological processes for thousands of years, you know, that was being ingrained. But now we have almost compartmentalized ourselves outside of the Everglades, and we are living in a cell of influence, which is strictly our own. Which I think reconnecting to this is just something really. It brings a lot of passion into my life. It brings a lot of beauty, and there's just a lot to absorb out here. That is something that's greater than myself. It's something that is beyond myself.
Yeah, and as a transplant, I value it very much as well, but for the exact reason that for most of my life, I did not have this in my backyard growing up. I moved down here from the Chicago area less than 5 years ago. And I mean, the Everglades as it currently stands now in a degraded but hopefully restored future state is all that I know. And ditto for the Ford Barrier Reef tract, that's now taking hit after hit when it rains, of course. I still am optimistic because there's a lot more opportunity now than there was then to connect people to this place. My ecological understanding just skyrocketed. And I'm still learning new things every day. And that's the beauty of it for me, is that I can find something new every time I go out here now that I have it in my own backyard. There's definitely a challenge in overcoming that shifting baseline syndrome, because South Florida's population is continuing to grow every day. We're having more and more people move here who have disease in their own backyard and really don't understand the significance of it. And the more people that do move here, the more pressure is being put on those resources. The restoration is still ongoing. And so, I mean, I really didn't know much at all about the Everglades before. I knew it was the only place where you could find alligators and crocs together in the world, and that it was a big wetland. That was it. I didn't know about the pinelands or the cypress or the mangroves or the estuaries in Florida Bay. And so we're coming from two completely opposite backgrounds here.
But
So,
two of the same sides of the coin
yeah.
in many ways.
And one of the reasons, yeah, thank you. One of the reasons I love that we're doing it this way, and that it's an AIRIE and the park have such a positive relationship, and it seems like they're integrating further and further, is because I think culture and arts is one of, not the only way, but one of the ways in which that ecological heritage will be further disseminated. One of the ways in which people will get a head start on caring about the Everglades. Again, I'm not saying it's the only way. People are going to be brought in by as many various hooks as we can have. But songs, plays, films, poems, they're like Trojan horses for this. We send them out, and they can meet people in the language and in the places where they spend time, and plant seeds that then turn into longer discourse. I mean, that's certainly the case for me. So I feel like transplants, natives, and everything in between, we share this common desire to have more people give a crap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you can't care about what you don't know. And I do feel like one of the things that AIRIE, I think an important part that the organization is playing is say, hey, let's get some artists who are inevitably going to go out and get on whatever bullhorn they have. And this is now going to be part of their advocacy. You know what I mean? So they're all going to do it in their own ways, but you can't spend a month here in this cabin at this park with you all and not leave investment. You know? Yeah.
Short and sweet, I guess, but just brought up, what you don't know. I still don't know what this place means to me. Really have no idea. I love ecology, I like wild spaces. But I'm still discovering this spot. All I do know is that there's just more every time I look. So I think some of the allure of the Everglades, by testament of the fact that people are in next to it, who know virtually nothing about it, is it's an unknown space. And it can be what you attach to it on the particular parts you find of it. I think the unknown is a big part of that feeling.
I agree. Yeah, and I think sometimes that unknown opens the door. It can be intimidating and at the same time inviting. Like, at least for me, when I started reintroducing myself to it, I think there was a humbling coming in and seeing the expansiveness of it and saying, like, I don't know how to differentiate between, what I'm walking past, and then also but I have like this innocence that I can look at it, and I can kind of start grasping and mapping out, like, oh, this is shifting. The needs are changing here. The plants are taller for some reason here, right? Like the water seems like it has oil, but there isn't oil in the water. Actually, it does. It's from the plant matter. Like, learning those things just as I was trudging through, so welcoming, and so it reminded me there's so much to love to learn. And it was so I fell in love with the unknown. It kind of kept bringing me back.
And you brought up a skill that you all are really, that every ranger that I've been out on seems to develop, maybe by training, maybe by disposition, is like hearing the news of the difference, like noticing the subtlest shift of plant life, of color, of sounds.
It's because we're nerds.
No, but it's a level of sensitivity
Absolutely.
that helps you tame some of the unknown. You may not you may not know exactly the why or but you can definitely notice it got warmer. It got warmer because of the hammock shade, you know, or so I love that you just brought up like being tuned to the differences because it's something I've been really admiring of in the working world.
Look at all the differences we have within 2 feet of elevation. It's obvious and distinct, and then there's the subtle ones that you pick up.
And that also plays into the whole gradient theme, where the gradient is not only between a very small array of heights and different ecosystems occurring within just like 10 feet of each other, but it's also the fact that we're a degree away from the tropics, and we also have the gradient of ecology. So we have a gradient of height, which is very small, a gradient of different biological life, which is very small. And South Florida, it just feels like everything coalesces into this weird, it's this weird middle ground, this Goldilocks just right zone that doesn't exist anywhere else on the earth. I feel like to derive pleasure from that, it ties into my own personal experience as somebody growing up in Miami, because I'm Hispanic, but I'm also an American. So it's like this amazing, it's hot, but then you look at South Florida's ecology, and that directly in and of itself is equally a melting pot as the culture in South Florida is. And it's a really cool connection. It's fascinating.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder, we've had a lot of party talk of the Everglades. So I would love to know, how is that translating into your work? Is there something that you want to share with us that you're being moved to, that connected to this moment, the space that we're taking?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I have the biggest thrust of the work I've been doing here has been working on an outline of a new full-length play, which I'll share a bit about because I think I've got a pretty solid premise leading here. But in order to just go to the gym, I try to at least 2 or 3 times a week finish like a 1-page poem, which I think of as like a little sculpture from my travels, my journeys. And so I think I'll share the piece of For the Man. So this is the first one I wrote while I was down here. And I was at the Flamingo Visitor Center, newly renovated. Check it out. It's very, very, very cool and informative. A shout out to the Flamingo Visitor Center. And I was having one of my favorite meat lunches is what's it called? Protein palette. Get them at TJ's. It's just a bunch of salami and cheese bites and almonds. And I was sitting there on the bench looking out at the marina, and I had a friend come in say hi to me. And so I came home later that afternoon and I wrote this. It's called Song for the West Indian Manatee. We saw each other for a moment, you surfacing for a breath. Late last week, me above you, on the boardwalk with a palm full of almonds, 2 loafers locking eyes in Sunday solidarity. When you turned, I saw the scars on your back, pockmarked and crisscrossed, death by 1,000 cuts, a chicken scratch that reads, to us you are nothing, a speed bump on the road to paradise. You swim down and I swell with love, the hot air we shared, the whiskers that make us both sensitive. You too grew a voice to call your mother with, fat, introvert, vegetarian, your life a guide to avoiding all war, a floating, farting rejection of everything we take so seriously. Will we ever accept the noonday miracle of your buoyant heart, the easy eyes that say another way is pleasurable, the warm blood, the tender milk, the long afternoons floating in hammock shade? We are the ones to be pitied. Forgive us our volume, forgive us our speed, forgive us for drifting so far afield. The warm waters are coming. Hold your breath. Soon the meek shall re-inherit the earth.
So all of this kind of ties everything that everybody has been saying, where it's welcoming, but be respectful and have a husbandry of the land, and know that you are part of that husbandry. And so I'd really love to know through this, you mentioned one of the lines, and I think I brought this up to you when we first talked about it, a speed bump on the road to paradise. And I feel like that's something that is so connected to how many folks actually feel street intimidated, right? And then there's the parallel with folks that come in with no respect and they're too loud, right, too fast, and are just irregardless. I think irregardless
Yeah.
of the environment around them. So I want to talk through that. Like, do you feel like you have, as you've gotten to know the environment more and walk through here, you feel yourself teetering between that, between like there is a missing of people coming in and understanding the beauty that's here, and then there's also a heavy presence of us here that's displacing.
You know, it's funny because I asked a very similar question to Ranger Allen. The first time I was in the park was a wet walk that I went on with Ranger Allen, who's not with us here. I asked that question because I had a similar sort of like enthusiasm to advocate for the park, but also concern. And his answer was very straightforward. I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, we're not quite close to an amount of people knowing and wanting to get into the park that I would temper my enthusiasm for advocacy. He was like, we need more, period. And yet you're bringing up a good point, is that we also want there to be a sensitivity and a respect for how people relate to living things. But isn't that true everywhere? I don't think that's relegated to the park. I mean, I think we have a challenge. I want to speak for myself, but I also know something that many people in my community recognize and affects their lives. You have a challenge with the relating to things as a utility, as objects of our utility. And the thing that I think is the greatest shift that can happen, that is, it's in the process of happening for me, is to recognize animate life, to be in subjective relationships to things that are also alive, that are, you know, it's like that. I remember in high school, somebody told me, somebody said something that I never forgot. No one is above me, no one is below me, haters to the left. That's also true about plants and insects and marine life and you know what I mean? Like, there's a big effort we have to make, and it's connecting to this comment that were made earlier about like decentering ourselves. And when you're in a landscape like this, it's imperative that you recognize yourself as part of meaning life, you know? And so a lot of these pieces, there's the one about an egret, there's one about a manatee, are just about my effort to be in subjective relationship with someone else that I also recognize has a family and a history and desires and hungers and feels pain and loss, you know. And I think that shifts everything. You're not gonna relate to it the same way once you are sensitive to the thing as a cousin, a sister, a sibling, a neighbor. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, it sounds almost like a shift in your internal compass, right, to relationship too.
Yeah.
Right, and like no matter how far north in Miami you drive, there's still the through line back. Right, and we were talking about earlier the shift of the waterway, right, and north to south, or just east to west. I think it's just so powerful. And the reason I bring that up is because when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned that somebody made a comment to you when there was flooding. Right.
Oh yeah.
Was it the water took the land back?
Yeah, shout out to Sister Robin, who took me on a drive. I went on this wonderful excursion with the folks of Love the Everglades. Houston, Jean, Sister Robin, thank you. And Sister Robin was gracious enough to take me down Loop Road.
Oh,
yeah. I told you we went and we saw that speakeasy at the end of Loop Road. I told you about Lucky. Lucky's cool with the cold. We won't say more about that. But I told Zee that we got to a place that was flooded over because it had rained earlier in the day. And Sister Robin's instinctive response was to say, oh, look, the water took this piece of land back. And I was like, so struck by that was her response, like to recognize that it hadn't always been dry land. It probably, in the case of in the long arc of history, had been water for longer than it had been land. And I just thought that was it was impactful, and it shifted the way I look at things like that.
Has that affected your writing? And do you feel like the cabin is a physical space that you're taking? So do you think that this influence of being engrossed in this way with your environment is going to influence and continue to evolve the way that you feel that point of orientation as you start writing forward?
I know it's gonna influence the way that I was actually, my partner was asking me about whether my writing is gonna change after this, and I said to her, I don't know, but I know I've changed. And so inevitably there will be a lens with which I bring to my work. Every time now I drive north on the turnpike, I feel in my body the taming of the land, like the land, you know what I mean? Like the shift of the landscape feels aggressive now in my body.
It's kind of gross.
I feel it now, and that will show up in my work because now I have new sensitivities to it. I'm like, wow, where did all this concrete and asphalt and like
You see that resistance too, because I'm even just on the corner by Robert is here. That view of the east that they've had for decades is now going to be another subdivision. And those real estate signs have been vandalized at least 3 times. I mean, vandalized.
Our homestead.
Yeah, vandalized in the sense that our property interests would look at it, but it's an active visual form of resistance to the rapid change that's going on, and the expression that ultimately most of who are already here is not wanted.
And there's 100 other issues that I can get into for hours of things that people in South Florida who care about ecology do not want. And I'm not going to get too into it right now, but it's really to see the flagrant destruction. Like, for example, I mean, I don't know if those kind folks on the Zoom right now can see it, but we are in Pine Rockland right now. And this is one of the most imperiled ecosystems in the entirety of the world. Only 2% of its original coverage in South Florida exists outside of Everglades National Park. So to think, and this goes back to ecological heritage, something, to me, trying to figure out what it is, kind of like trying to figure out who I am. The people living in South Florida not having access to this amazing ecosystem. It's great diversity of flowering plants. It's kind of open, silent canopy. It's warm. It's kind of rocky, almost aggressive, but yet inviting atmosphere. For people to not have access to this, it almost makes me question, why do people want to live in Miami? If you don't want to live in Miami for the stuff that has evolved to be there for so long, it almost shows that humans are the same way we can be creative and accommodating and wonderful. It's almost feels a little self-interested to create these artificial environments and these gated residential and all these artificial environments. We are animals and we live in environments, but it's really about what environment we pick to live in is really how much we care for ourselves, how much we nurture ourselves and our fellow man.
I have the last few years understood. Well, actually, it predates last few years. Last few years, it's just sharpened, and it now starts to. Hearing it more than once in different voices makes me understand what the counter viewpoint is, which is, and I'm going to say it the way that I've heard it. Oh, Miami could really be something. There's so much possibility here. It's like a blank canvas. I'm somebody who works in words, so I really key into the language that people are using to describe a place. There is a lot of people who come here because what you're describing is a humility and a recognizing yourself as part of a continuum. There's been a lot that's happened before me, a lot that's going to happen after me. I am a grain of sand of the beach. Yes. But the argument that we are in resistance against, or that we are trying to raise our voices against, is the one that says, oh, this place is going to be a canvas for what I bring in. You know what I mean? This place is an empty space that I get to fill with my visions of what have you, you know, which I think is an incredibly violent way of thinking about moving to a space, you know, not just Miami, anywhere. Like, and I think creatives have a part to play in that, because I think a lot of the voices that I'm referencing come from creative people who've moved to Miami recently and are like, oh, I'm gonna kill it here.
Money.
Miami's on the up.
Using the word kill.
Yeah, right, exactly. Anyway, I feel like you had a question over it.
Actually, I think we had a question.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask, how has being in the Everglades, as someone who's like from Miami and all this, like, how has it redefined your understanding of home, or has it?
It has both, and that actually, I'm going to answer the question, and I'm going to read another short piece. It has made me feel it has right sized. I was going to say made me feel smaller, but what I mean by that is that it has made me better informed about my position in this massive history and landscape. Part of that, I grew up in the Cuban exile community. I think this is true of a lot of demographic, a lot of communities. We mostly tell the story of Miami that started in 1959. We mostly center our migration and our people's migration in the stories I grew up with, and there's deep pride. I don't want to mistake that. I have deep pride in what my grandparents and what my community has done in this land. But this predated my residence here, and this has really entrenched it, is that there's also pride to be taken in living in a place that was abundant and fertile long before your community arrived here, and that those citizens of this land still live here. You can still meet them, you know? And so I both feel smaller and more powerful, because I feel like I've better positioned my family's story in the longer timeline, but also I've recognized how connected I am to all of it, because I am also sun and water and soil, you know? So like, it doesn't make me, I don't say I feel small like I'm unique. I feel like small and powerful. Like, yeah, most of my family got here in the 60s, but we are made of the same thing as the people who were tending this land hundreds of years before. And so we are connected to that past as well, you know. And I want to read this little short piece because I read a bunch of things that are to my community, my neighbors, my cousins. But this is about a particular word that has grown in popularity, particularly because the rapper Pitbull uses it a lot. But I wrote a reclamation of that word. It's called Pitbull's Promise. Suppose we let that word become our way. 2 syllables built like a crowbar. Dar, which is the shaft, and le, which hooks the object. Suppose we could use it to pry open doors, to remove the nails from each other's crosses. We would walk the length of Biscayne Boulevard like great emancipators, dislodging the songs from our neighbors' throats, saying, go on, go ahead, you can do it. Just like God did in Genesis, when he tired of the darkness, so he said to the light, Dale.
Dale.
It's like a word that could mean so much. Go ahead. But yeah, anyway. So I've been reflecting on the question you asked a lot.
Thank you. And look at the camera. Got it.
Yeah.
I almost want to kind of bring it back into the intimacy of the space, right? 'Cause we chose to be in the cabin that you have been inhabiting. And there's just so much life history story, right? Because a month before you, there was someone, a month after you, there will be someone. And even before the artists were here, the ranger. So I just want to know, talk to me a little bit about what that transition into this being your home for the last couple weeks has been. I remember you told me coming in months before you were here, I got a plan. Woo, this is what we're gonna do. Right? But then you came here and let's talk about it in the sense that this space gave you permission to go about it the way you have to. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. You know, because the structures that we talk about, that we recognize on the drive north of the turnpike, they're not just external structures, they become internal structures. Like my life, I run a small business, I'm a producer, I was a nonprofit administrator for a long time. My days can feel like a Google calendar sometimes. Like I can literally tell you, oh, 11:30 to 12:30, I have this call, and I have a half an hour to get to lunch in Edgewater. That's going to be a 90-minute. I can see the blocks, right? There are no rectilinear squares in this land. You will not see that shape in the Everglades. The shape of a Google calendar that also represents the shape of the skyscrapers of Miami skyline, that shape is not out here. And so I didn't expect, I thought I was gonna have an agenda, you know what, I told you what it was. And then over the course of that first week, like the wildness of the landscape started seeping into the way I thought about how to fill the day. And so I would say the first couple of days I wrote an agenda, and I would wake up and be like, okay, you got the first couple of hours of research on the plane, and you're gonna go on a hike. And by the end of that first week, I was like, what does the weather look like? You know, how hot is it? Do I feel up for a bike ride? Like, there is something about this land that makes you almost need to be responsive. Like, I don't know, y'all listening. South Florida has very dramatic weather. Like, to use actor language, the weather is your constant scene partner. Like, you cannot impose your will on the weather. Like, you will have to tango with it. And so, like, I've had this little harbor, and for folks thinking about applying to the residency, you're very comfortable in this cozy cabin. Thank you to the AIRIE team. They take very good care of you. But obviously, you want to leave that door as often as you possibly can. And over the course of my time here, I've just begun to be less tame and less sure of what I was going out to go see and do, and more just with a bigger appetite to get lost, you know. So that's what happened. Even this morning, I got up, I had no idea I was going to do this. I thought today was going to be about prepping the space, but it was really cool this morning, and I have an inflatable kayak that I have to use. So I went out to the pond. I was just telling Max, and I spent the morning getting to know the mangrove channels in Tuesday Pond with no great meditation about that at all. But and those who know me know that's not very Alejandro. That would be surprising for folks to hear that, but it's something that this place does.
I'm not gonna. I think, if you don't mind, you can transition over to one more piece. Or is there an online question?
Yes. We'd like you guys get to do one virtual question for
Yeah, let's do it.
transition. Great.
Okay.
So the question here is, which I'm gonna speak loudly and hope that it makes it over there. You made a statement that you quote, "You can't care about what you don't know." Could you speak more to how you see your practice incorporating things you learned and experienced while at AIRIE? And what importance do you see as an artist to amplify and share these stories and topics amongst our communities?
That's a perfect question, and I could have scripted that to segue to this last piece.
Perfect.
Because I write for the theater and I write for people to come and watch. Like I don't write nonfiction. I write human beings interacting on stage. One of the practical things I could do is take the emotions that this landscape has brought up in me, which are many. I've been frustrated by mosquitoes on Coastal Prairie Trail. I've been worried because nature's also brutal. I've been worried for my safety as I realized I was knee deep in water on a bike trail and had to get my bike back to dry land. I've also been filled with wonder and putting those emotions in the mouths of the people that I grew up with. Because I'll be honest, like the rangers, I've loved getting to know like the world of words that you all inhabit. Like there's a nomenclature that comes from your studies that I have been a student of. But I also know one of my roles in our team is to take some of the same feelings we feel and put it in a different world of words, like and expand the ways in which people talk about the land and express what they feel about the land. And so the play that I'm working on, and any play that I write about this land, is inevitably going to feature the people who I grew up with. So this will segue me, and thank you for the question. The play that I'm working on is just an outline form, but I feel pretty proud that in the month I've got a pretty sturdy shape to this piece, which is about a father, a fairly young father, who loses his daughter in a big storm event. After having had a big fight with her, so he has a lot of guilt in mind, and then this storm event happens. She actually leaves because of this fight, and he can't find her the next morning. And probably the first half of the play is him journeying south, following the clues that he has. He finds her phone. He ultimately, just to cut to the sort of how the play rounds out, he ultimately finds her living in Flamingo Village, having been taken in by a group of people who are living off the grid, like misfits and some outlaws who have taken in this young girl. And she's very happy there. And so he has to contend with the fact that he wants to bring her home, but she may not be ready to go home with him. And partly it's about letting go and how people grow up and leave you. It's about a death of a certain sort of form, you know? But also the play is allowing me on this gentleman's journey to find his daughter to fill pages with like the crazy, mesmerizing, outrageous stuff that you find all the way down the road to Flamingo, the bottom of the peninsula, you know? And so I'm going to read some of the source material. This is a short piece. It's actually by a very close friend who grew up down here as well, and he's gone on to write for television and films in LA. But because the play that I'm writing is still in outline form, I thought this captured the spirit of what I mean in response to the question. So just two caveats. This is not, Ranger Daniel made it clear, this is not factually accurate. This is a story that is some person's interpretation of what happened, but not actually the science tells us not what happened. And two, it has pretty colorful language. So if you're offended by some, okay, it's called Python Fight. And my background's in the theater, so I thought a culminating gift would just be sharing a short play with you. We ready?
Yep.
We good?
Yep.
All right. Two things you got to know for this shit to make sense. Thing one, Burmese pythons live in the Everglades. Thing two, Burmese pythons ain't from the Everglades. They're from wherever Burmese shit comes. Burma, Burmenia, wherever. But if you live where I live, which is the swamp, you see them all the time. Slithering around like lost, like nothing, not blending in for shit, looking like, I don't know, highlighter yellow in a world that's brown and green. So one day I see this one slithering around doing what it does, which is mostly look around like, why the fuck am I together? And I can see it pretty good. I'm maybe 10, 20 feet away. And maybe 20 feet away sounds a lot of feet to be away, but these shits are big, full grown, stretched out. Fuck that. I'm closer to this thing than it is to its own tail. And this ain't the first time I saw when I established that, I hope, but it is the first time that right in front of me, I see something else. An alligator. And the alligator's moving around like mad slow, king of the jungle shit. Not the jungle, the swamp thing, whatever, you know. But just alligator shit, like regular, like normal, like blah. Whatever's normal if you're an alligator. And then there goes the python, slither, slither, and then there goes the alligator, blah, and suddenly, bam, they both stop. And the birds stop flying, the fish stop swimming, fucking even mosquitoes stop biting. I know because the python and the alligator are staring deep into each other's black eyes. Like, what the fuck are you? And then like, ah, what the fuck are you? And they're just like frozen. They're just like there. But then I see that the alligator points his snout, nose, mouth shit like an inch to the left. And the python moves like an inch to the right. And I know what's coming because I'm not stupid. And they're going like an inch to the left and then 2 inches to the right, 3 inches to the left, 4 inches to the right, another inch, 2 inches, 3, 2, 4, 3, like that, moving back and forth like a showdown, like Frankenstein versus Dracula shit, National Geographic shit if you know about cables. And I know they're cold-blooded, but I swear they start sweating. The fucking alligator is snapping forward like, da, 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 like, get in here, bitch, like, da, da, like, get in my mouth, you python, where did you fucking come from? And the python swinging and slithering from side to side like a boxer without no fists, like, just like, and the alligator's moving faster, and the python's twisting him now in like semicircles, like he's trying the left and then the right side. But I'm like, what the fuck are y'all doing? Just run, snake! That's an alligator! But snakes don't run because God put their feet in Genesis. So maybe like slither, snake. You can laugh. That's okay. You can laugh. Slither, snake. But snakes don't speak English, especially not from Burma, and they don't got no ESOL for python. So I'm more like, God, just God. And the python actually, I swear to God, the python, this is true. It looks at me. Like makes eye contact with me in the office. Like, what the fuck are you saying? And I'm like, don't look at me. And he's like, what? And I'm like, don't you are fighting an alligator. And he's like, I know. I mean, he doesn't say it, but you can kind of see it in his eye when a python looks at you. You can kind of tell a little bit. And the gator's like, bah, bah. And then the python, I swear to God, on my mom, on my dad, on my sister, on my whole shit, I swear this happened. The python looks at me again one last time after the gator goes, tra. And the python winks at me. Just like that, like winks, I swear, and not like winks because he sweared, not because like there's an alligator going tra kind of wink. No, not like a scared close your eyes kind of wink. Like a wink, like he looks at me like we had a connection, and he's like, hey, bro, watch this. And suddenly the python that don't even belong in the Everglades, swoops around the alligator on the left side. And before the alligator even knows what's up, the python's ESOL ass slithers under him on one side, then comes up the other side and wraps around the alligator. And of course, the alligator is going like, tra, tra, holy shit, tra, but nothing because the python's wrapping himself and wrapping himself and wrapping himself over and over again, and the alligator can't reach him with his tra. The alligator's jaw starts flapping again, but not like he's trying to get the python anymore, not like he's trying, he can't reach, not like a big tra, more like he's screaming at heaven, like he's praying Hail Marys to an alligator Mary, like, get this python the fuck off me, how could you let this happen? And suddenly, the alligator stops. Tra. And that's it. The python slinks away like a foot and raises his head like mad weird, like shit you ain't never seen before that makes you think that for real, the pictures of the church center ain't that stupid. And for real, yeah, the devil was a snake. And you could see its mouth, the python, getting bigger and bigger, and it's like unlocking and stretching and opening, and it moves mad slow, like it's gonna kiss the alligator right on the lips, not on the lips, because the alligator don't got no lips, you know it. And though it's still wrapped around the alligator and it ain't letting go, it keeps stretching out. So it's like, where is all this python coming from? And it moves closer and closer and closer because he's gonna swallow the motherfucker whole. Because he ain't even from here, but he fucking came and he found the king of this shit and he just cracked his back like fiberglass, and it's slow, and it's disgusting. But it's one of them shits you gotta watch, like when somebody gets stabbed or a car accident or a flu shot, because if you ain't looking at it, there ain't no way it's real. And I don't know if pythons like have spit in their mouth, because if I had to swallow an alligator whole, I need at least a glass of water to barbecue sauce shit. That in 10 seconds or 10 minutes, I don't even know, the python's like halfway done. And in another 10 seconds or 10 minutes, what even is an hour anymore, the python's like 3/4 done. That alligator is going. But then out of nowhere, the whole thing shakes just once, right quick, like that, just once. And at first I think it's something else mad weird that the python does when it's eating, but then it shakes like that again. And I could tell that the python isn't expecting it, because it's not like mad slow and weird like everything else, like when he popped his mouth open. No, this is like not even supposed to happen. And I could see that what it is, it's that alligator. It's that alligator moving around again inside, moving around exactly like it was before, only now he's wearing that python like a pair of fucking jeans. And now the python that was winning like a second ago, suddenly it looks to me like he's the one that's looking up and screaming at heaven, only they don't hear shit, because he can't say shit, because he got alligator in his mouth. And the python starts to slide off the alligator in the opposite way, like he's spitting him out, like he's trying to backpedal shit, like remix. But the alligator won't let him, and the alligator can't breathe, but the alligator won't let him. And for the first time, I hear like a scream, and I can't tell if it's a python scream or an alligator scream, but I know it ain't me. It's a noise like I never heard, like a baby crying, but not like a regular baby. No, like a baby who swallows glass. And my eye goes right to it. One alligator claw bursting through from the inside of the python. He is ripping his way. He is ripping through the python's leather stomach, and the skin's tearing in all directions. And the alligator, you could see ripping, and the scream becomes a shriek, and the alligator stops moving, but he does not stop ripping, because anywhere the python tries to go, all he does is tear himself open more and more. And in a second or two or three, the python stops moving too. And there they are. And the python's eye looks over my way again. And I'm gonna be honest with you, at this point, I take a shit. Let's be honest. Because I'm pretty sure, at least I thought I don't believe in the devil, but that's the devil. And if not the devil, it's somebody who works for me. And his eye jets around like it's looking for me, like it wants to say something again, only this time, not watch this, bro. This time it wants to give me some last words or some last curse or some shit. And I don't know what made me, but I got even closer. And I can see in its python eyes the flashback of that 16, 17, 18-year-old kid who didn't know no better, who dumped him there in the swamp, in the Everglades, in the marsh, thinking it was the best thing for it. Thinking if mom won't let me have him, I may as well release him back to where he belongs. Thinking things are better for him here. You could see in its eyes the flashback of that first day, week, month, when it was wandering around the Everglades. Like, no, I don't nobody speak Burmese. Thank you.
Well, I think that about takes us right up to our time. What a better way to end. I have my own play, but obviously he decided to take all the time off for himself.
My bad.
No, but again, thank you guys. Thank you for joining in the conversation. Thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. Thank you to the AIRIE team that has been through from beginning to end for inviting me.
Yeah, shout out to Oxmoor, wherever you're at. Thank you, Oxmoor.
Thank you for all of you that have done the background, that have done the IT, that have done the audio. All of this takes a village, and the village is definitely here. I just have the privilege of being able to be a part of it. So thank you guys. AIRIE, this has been incredible. I hope folks understand that this is just the beginning. There's another chapter, and I hope that they get to keep hearing things.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.